Today on Corinne's Picks, we have the remarkable photographer Howard Cash. Welcome to Corinne's Picks. Today we have a renowned photographer, Howard Cash. This is a follow-up episode to an episode we did on the Afro-American Photographers Annual Project with Howard Cash. This episode we're going to focus mainly on the artwork, the photography of Howard Cash. I'm going to do very little talking because we have about 28 images to get through. So I really want the audience to get to know your work intimately. I'm going to turn it over to you. Can we have the first image?
The first image was one of the first images I took. I went to school in Los Angeles at LACC. They had an outstanding photography department, and this image is called My Baby. And I shot that on the streets of Los Angeles in 1977. This is my first trip to Ghana, which was in '78. And I shot that in Accra, the Accra market, the market area, Makola markets. And even a Ghanaian or Nigerian would know exactly where that is. This was in 1978, 79. And this is my first photograph I took at Tafawa Balewa Square in Nigeria. And this is Babani Masha. He was Fela's baritone sax player. This is where I got my first job, and it's called the Concord Group of Newspapers. The gentleman in the middle is Abiola, MKO Abiola. To the left is Delegiwa and other prominent members of staff of the Concord. He became president. Well, he was elected president. Unfortunately, he died in custody. But Abiola was a very, very, very rich man, but he loved to be able, he was a businessman, he was an entrepreneur, and he loved to be able to talk about the politics of Nigeria. And in this platform, you just talk freely about anything that was not non-governmental. It was the first non-governmental newspaper that was in Nigeria. This is called The Winner, and this is a picture I took, and actually it was on my birthday, and it was at they have tennis matches in Nigeria. People don't understand sometimes that Nigeria has basically a lot of things that the West has. So it's called The Winner. This was where I was staying, and I stayed at a place called Igbobi. And this piece is called A Moment's Pause. And it's been loved by many, many people. And it's basically a museum quality photograph. This was power. This was Muammar Gaddafi and his visit to Nigeria. And the gentleman to the far right, almost, that's his cousin. And they visited, I think it was in like 81 or 81 or 82. And I was covering it for, I think it was a Concord, new group of newspapers. This was a job I did for the NTA. I covered 19 states in Nigeria. And this was the coronation of the Oba Benin. And it was such a wonderful, wonderful day that day where everybody came out and celebrated him coming into power. It was in Benin. It was really wonderful. This was a coverage I did for. I covered a lot of people that were musicians, and the young lady to the left, that's Valerie. She was with the Brothers Johnson. Those of you who don't know the Brothers Johnson, he was with Quincy Jones, and they had a concert there in 1981. So I covered her, and this is called Listen to Me, and it's been well received by many
Who's the
people.
young man?
The young man is a Fulani man,
Oh, wow.
and he just walked over to her and just started talking. And she just started listening, and that was the magic of it. He wasn't rapping, he was just talking. And she said he told her things she had never heard before, but she wouldn't tell us what he said.
I bet.
Fela. Fela on Broadway was a musical show that was done about 3-4 years ago. I photographed Fela in 1981 at the Shrine in Nigeria, and I also photographed him again when he came to New York in '89 at a club in Manhattan. But yeah, this is Fela Nicola Kuti at the Shrine in Nigeria in 1981. This one's called, let's see, Conversations with Grandma. And it's a beautiful piece that shows how a younger lady a young girl is being taught by her grandmother things of, I guess you would say the values of life. But if you look in between the seats, there's another child with her foot out. And that was a surprise in that photograph. Sometimes you get surprises when you develop a print that are far beyond what you thought you originally saw. This is when I came home for a minute. And I was able to get on a bus with DC-37. My mother, God rest her soul, and happy Mother's Day to belated to all you ladies. I went down to DC to the March on Washington. Coretta Scott King had organized it. And the gentleman to the left is her son, Martin Luther King III. It's called A Moment with My Son. This was when I covered the Jesse Jackson campaign. Now, whatever you might say about Jesse, that's Reverend Abernathy to the left, he was the template, the forerunner to Barack Obama, because it gave the world an insight into a smart, intelligent, hardworking, astute black man. This is called The Hunter, King of the Hunters, Abiodun. And it took us about 6 hours to get to where he lived. I was photographing his family. Then he asked me to take one of him. And this photograph appeared in the Brooklyn Museum show, Committed to the Image 2001, here in New York. It's called The Hunter. This is the King of Oshogbo. And I covered the King of Oshogbo for the Guardian newspaper in Nigeria. And this is photograph along with a gentleman I was working with, Eli Obasi. I think I was working with Shaibu on this. I think Shaibu and I were working together on this. And it was just a beautiful day. It was called the Oshun Shrines, the Oshun, what do you call it? The Oshun Festival. And everybody gets dressed up for that and goes to the water and to celebrate Oshun. This is Queen Bees. This is where I began photographing when I returned to Nigeria, when I returned from Nigeria. I always kept my hand in things that were Afrocentric because I saw the beauty of us on either continent, it didn't matter, visually. So this is the dance group from Mozambique. And this was at Town Hall. But I started playing with slow motion a little bit. And so that's how I came up with this image called Queen Bees. This is called Going Home. This is part of my Sunday series. Sunday is a day when people get up, they get dressed up, they go to church. Right now, this is Palm Sunday. She's coming from church, his grandmother with her grandchildren. To the right is the Schomburg. library in Harlem, and they collected this for their archives. This is called Praise the Lord. This won me a Brio rather, and I think it was 2006. This is a mass baptism which takes place in Harlem every year. This right here is called Dress Rehearsal, and this is the Uptown Dance Academy, and they were nice enough to give me access to let me photograph their events. And it's one of my it's one of my prized photographs. I really enjoy it. This is when I went down to the Gullah, and that's Maggie Green cleaning fish.
Oh, wow.
And that was one of my. I would stay with her. I mean, it wasn't I just visit. I mean, stay with her. Whenever I went down there, I had to stay with her. Because the funny thing about it was that she was the same year as my mother in terms of birth. And my mother was born on November 18th, and she was born on November 20th. So being around her was very spiritual.
Is that her house or a special?
That's like it's not an outhouse. It's like an adjacent house to the back, and her house is to the right.
So it's like a shed that she uses.
Yeah, like a shed.
A utility shed.
Yeah. This is called Cousins, and we come back to the Bronx. This is also part of my Sunday series. And I was able to take this just by looking at I think I looked at the father or the mother, and I think it was the father. And he gave me a nod, and I gave him a nod, and then I was able to take the picture. So we understood, because these kids were cleaning. And they're called Cousins. This is part of my Katrina project. This is called the Woodard family, and there was a family that had to leave leave New Orleans, and were brought back together in Noonan, Georgia. So my son and I, we went on the journey to photograph them in their new residence for the time being, but then later on, they went back to New Orleans. It's called the Woodard family. After 9/11, we had the opportunity. I was working with a group called Image Griots up here in the Bronx. And so what we did was we interviewed and photographed people pertaining to 9/11 to get the African-American take on 9/11, because when you looked on television, it always seemed to be that white folks were being discussed, were the ones that were talking about 9/11, and they didn't seem to want to interview black people. So we interviewed a series of African-American people, Muslims, and this is Ben Armstead, and it's called The Intellectual.
So those are really remarkable, riveting images. We are going to go to a 2-minute PSA.
Okay.
And then we're going to look at some more of your images and then talk a little bit.
Okay, great.
Okay. back with Howard Cash, the remarkable photographer. We were exploring his images from different parts of the world, it seems. Let's continue. Let's continue looking at your work and talking
Great.
about some of these images.
Great. Now, this is a very interesting image. I began writing after a while. As you comprise so many images, you begin writing, you begin to go into that next level of creative dialogue within yourself. And this is a piece that I did. It's called Jazz Legacies in Harlem. But this one I particularly chose because the next image will be a violinist. But this was, Noel Pointer used to come up to Reverend Foster's church in the Bronx, and he used to play before he passed away. And I'll never forget that. That's how I became familiar with Noel Pointer, on the radio, whatever, but I would see him with his violin up at the Reverend Foster's church. And so the idea that a violin brings, it can do two things, well, it can do many things, but it can make you cry, or it can make you laugh, it can make you dance. A violin in the hands of an artist, a musician, is a very beautiful and powerful and spiritual instrument. This one is called, oh God, I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Next Generation.
Thank you, appreciate it. There's an event that takes place in Harlem on, I think it's around the summertime, where everybody comes out to praise and honor this I think he's Senegalese gentleman whose name, unfortunately, I can't think of, so please don't shoot me.
Is he an imam?
He's like an imam, but it's a big celebration. In the morning, they come and they eat. They feed folks, and then they march from 116th Street up to 125th Street. And I just saw these lovely girls, and it was just so beautiful. And so finally, after a while, I was able to get a shot that I loved. So yeah. This is a project where I'm in. This is Chicago, and it's called the Bud Billiken Parade. And the Bud Billiken Parade takes place where before kids go to school, they have companies and organizations come together, supply them with books, backpacks, pencils, pads, etc. In order to get them, this way when they go to school, they have the supplies that they need in order to participate in class. Now, this was one of the last, this I think is probably the last image. Mm-hmm. This is called Shining Star. And Shining Star, if you're familiar with Felix Hernandez has preserved a lot of our music, rhythm and blues music from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And he has these dance clubs, these dance events. And so I was able to photograph her. I think this is the one in, this is the one I think in Queens. And it was a series, but this image was one, it just allows us to come out, because we come from back in the day where, in our music was a love for, and also lessons about life and love for our women and men, but we also had to learn about life and so on and so forth. The composers, the singers, everybody, added something intelligent into our world. So here she is just having a good time. It's called Shining Star.
Those were, I feel like I've gone on a journey looking at 28 images, like I've gone all around, the decades of your career. What are you currently working on in terms of, are you still shooting?
Yeah, I'll be back in Chicago for the Silver Room block party in July. I'm working on a book called Black Folks Don't Hate Each Other. And so some of these images, some of these series will go into there along with other series that I haven't shown. But yeah, so I'm still shooting, and I'm going to visit. But now I'm really dealing more with the African American Photographers Annual. So
Okay. And can for those who didn't see the first show, where that was exclusively about the annual, can you just, I know you did it before in another show, but can you just briefly give an overview of that project?
basically, it's a project where we bring together about 60, 65 African American photographers. 20 of them are women,
Okay.
and we show their work. The theme is on community. So we show the humanity of how we live and how our lives are in various communities across the world, really.
Right,
So
right.
basically, but primarily Africa, African American, places where Black people come together to do the things they care about
Okay.
and with the people that they care about.
Okay. And to support that project?
Yeah, to support that project, just go to Fractured Atlas and donate to the African American Photographers Annual, and you'll get a tax deduction for whatever amount of money you donate.
Okay, so basically we saw almost a retrospective of your work over the decades. What would you say has been the highlight of your career?
Probably just to still be alive today, because a lot of my friends have passed, and so there were so many highlights. I mean, in terms of imagery,
Like in terms of the shoots or the projects that you worked on, what do you think really fed your soul?
probably just photography itself.
Okay.
Just being able to shape an image of beauty and positive that's positive of us as a people. Because basically, I always say photography chose me because my background was in African American literature
Okay.
from the Harlem Renaissance, and so with that as an understanding of the nuances of living black in this world, visually I'm able to bring it out through the camera.
And you definitely, you majored in literature, but you are telling stories absolutely with the camera.
Well, literature was something that was given to me by my high school teacher, Ms. Melton at Laurinburg Institute in North Carolina. And she made us learn the poems and Shakespeare and Langston Hughes and Paul Laurence Dunbar and all those, and Tales are Simple. So I knew the beauty of Black life. I mean, we did a lot of reading. Malcolm X, where I read Malcolm, and I'm sure that there were so many other books I read I can't even think of them now. But it gave me an insight into how we should be seen, and then you get to a point where you see how major media depicts us in terms of in anger and rage and and destitute and in poverty. And you say, well, that may be, but that's not who we are. And a lot of times that's who we are because they've created those circumstances for us to try to find the best way we can get out. So I always tell people we're not responsible for how we got enslaved, we're responsible for how we get out.
And what you're saying speaks to, I don't remember the professor's name, but there's a concept of cognitive dissonance, that once they basically diminish your humanity, they kind of rationalize being able to do bad things to you because
Correct.
they don't see you as a person. They don't feel they don't see your suffering.
It's the propaganda of they have one of the greatest propaganda arms or platforms that of anyone. But the idea is that fortunately we have a lot of Today we have a lot of African American storytellers in film, in literature, in photography, and we can somewhat balance that out. The idea is don't let people define your elegance, especially those that have an agenda of trying to use you, take advantage of you, and especially get your money. Because the idea of certain things is to separate you from your money, and your money sometimes is your power to be able to form teams and projects that will allow you to empower yourselves and your family and friends.
Okay. Can you your email is going to be
Cool.
in the credits.
Yeah.
When we go to the credits, is there a website that you want people
Yeah.
to go
Just
to?
they just Google Howard Cash.
Okay, just Google your Howard Cash.
Or there's howardtcashphotography.com.
And I know that your major project is the Afro American Photographers Annual Project. However, what if they wanted one of the prints in either show?
Just email me.
So just email you. So the
Right.
prints are
Right,
available.
but first
via
go to my
email?
website so you can see the pricing.
Pricing. Okay.
Yeah, and then you
Okay.
can email me. Yeah.
Okay. I am, like I said before, gratitude for you being on my show.
Pleasure.
I feel really honored. I love your work,
Thank you.
and I intend to follow the journey of this project
Okay.
with the
Thank you.
photographers, and hopefully get some of them on the
Yeah,
show.
and they'd love it. Yeah.
So, any final words of encouragement for young photographers out there? Anybody wanting to start a career in photography?
Well, I can speak about. We have a group now we're putting together called Black Photographers Collective, and there are 5 of us. Well, it's really 6 of us. There's Debbie, Melanie, Isu, Rudy, and Nate, and myself. And we're going to be putting together what's called a youth platform, where we're going to be taking young photographers, looking at some of their work, and trying to help them, deal with doing better imagery. So I have to see what they're doing first, but just keep in touch with me, and the minute we get a youth director, we'll be able to start executing some of those ideas.
Okay. Thank you.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
again.
My pleasure.
Thank
Corinne,
you.
it was my pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.